I mentioned last week that James is one of my favorite books in the Bible. And as I was writing that sermon last week, I started to think, wouldn't it be cool if we could just keep on talking about James for a couple more weeks? And then it hit me, hey, I'm the pastor now. I can do that if I want. So that's exactly what we're going to do. For the next few weeks, we're going to look at the rest of the book of James. And I know it's a little bit awkward to start now after I already spoke about half of chapter 3 last week, but we'll manage. Let's start with a little bit of background on this book. First of all, who wrote it? James. That's easy enough to answer. He says so right up front. He introduces himself as James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. But James is a pretty common name, so which one are we talking about? Most scholars attribute this letter to James the Just. Now, James the Just is the brother of Jesus. And when you have that information, and whether we're talking about a biological brother here, or maybe a half-brother, or maybe even a cousin, because there is some debate about that, how cool does that make his introduction? How many of us would introduce ourselves as a servant of our sibling? I think that this goes to show just how profound an impact Jesus had on those around him, that even his own relative was so totally devoted to following him that he didn't even introduce himself as Jesus' brother. He was a servant, a follower of Jesus. So now that we know who this letter is from, we can look at who it's written to. His letter is addressed to the 12 tribes scattered abroad. What does that mean? Does it even apply to us? Because I don't know about you, but I don't remember joining any tribes lately. Specifically, this is a reference to the 12 tribes of Israel. These tribes together make up the Jewish people, so we can surmise that this letter is written to the Christian believers among the Jewish people. Symbolically, though, aren't we all somewhat scattered believers in Christ? Think about it in terms of today, when the numbers of church people are falling year after year. We are, in actuality, becoming more scattered than we have been in ages past. Not only that, aren't we all in exile of sorts, waiting for Jesus to return or for us to finally find our way back to the kingdom of God? So in a way, James's letter is really to all of us, the believers in Christ, scattered and exiled though we may be. And it's written that way too. Logically, you would think a letter written to someone who is scattered abroad might be written so that they can find their way back. The rest of this letter is basically a path for us to live as Christians. It's a way for us to get back to our life in Jesus. And that's what we're going to explore for the next few weeks. What does James tell us about living as Christians? The first thing is probably the most appropriate thing he could have led off with, and that's what we're talking about today. James doesn't start off by telling us that we're about to embark on a life full of glory, our every need cared for, not a worry to weigh us down. No, he actually starts off by telling us all about trials and temptations. He's preparing us to react when things go wrong. I believe he's essentially telling us, get ready. This isn't the easiest thing in the world. And he's right. As we continue our journey in learning more and more about Jesus and the life he wants us to lead, we should naturally learn more about what we should and shouldn't do. And when we learn, like we will in the coming weeks, that this does include things like being slow to get angry or to listen to others, or to watch what we say, well, these things aren't always easy. We're going to face trials. We're going to be tempted to break those rules. What's that saying about ignorance being bliss? Wouldn't it be easier for us to know nothing of these rules and just live however we want? And the tough answer to that question is, unfortunately, yes, it probably would be easier. But James offers us a counterpoint. Even if it's easier, it might not be better. To see what I mean here, let's look at the first part of our reading for this week from James chapter 1, verses 2 through 12. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Can't remember where I broke these up. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. Believers in humble circumstances ought to take pride in their high position, but the rich should take pride in their humiliation, since they will pass away like a wildflower. For the sun rises with scorching heat and withers the plant. Its blossom falls and its beauty is destroyed. In the same way, the rich will fade away even while they go about their business. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. I would venture a guess that this is not advice you hear very often. In the face of trials of any kind, consider it pure joy. Say what now? I think today we're more often told that we should just feel what we feel, whether it be anger, frustration, sadness, even despair. And yet here's James. He's telling us to feel pure joy. Now I want to make one thing clear. I don't think that there's any fault in us feeling anger or feeling frustration, sadness, or any of those other emotions during times of trial. Those are human emotions, and we do happen to be humans. What I believe James is saying here is that we also need to have some perspective. And the perspective he offers is this: when we push through our trials, when we persevere, as he puts it, that experience will help us grow into more complete people of faith. And if that isn't enough reward for standing firm through hard times, we're also set to receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who loved him. More mature, more complete, not lacking anything, and the crown of life. Okay, this is starting to sound better. That sounds like something that we could actually be joyous about. In much the same way, Jesus tells us to have a similar perspective about temptations that we face. When tempted, no one should say, "God is tempting me." For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits in all he created. Not only does God not tempt us, he is the one who sends us every good and perfect gift. Like our reward for persevering through temptation, I think that's a comforting thought. I believe that these two ideas that James talks about in this passage are also tied together in this way as well. I don't think he's only saying that trials and temptations are two of the bad things that we may face. I believe that James is saying something more about how he sees God operating in our lives. And what I believe he's saying is this: God doesn't put these negative things in front of us. Instead, he wants to be the one to help us and to teach us no matter what we face. God isn't trying to trip us up. He's not trying to see where we're weak. He's not trying to tempt us, like James says. To tie these two together, I don't even think that God is really trying to test us, to put trials up in our way like some sort of cosmic obstacle course. I know James doesn't say that specifically in our reading this morning. He does say that God does not tempt us. He does not specifically say that God does not test us. But I do actually think that's implied. And I also know that that might be a little bit controversial, because when trials arise in our lives, when one of us faces something difficult, it's a cliche to say God must be testing you. This must be a part of his plan. But what would that really mean, though? First of all, we wouldn't be much more than just an experiment for God. We would be more like dominoes that God sets up just to see all the interesting ways that we fall down under pressure. But second of all, if God sent us these bad situations we face, wouldn't he be more along the lines of tempting us to give in, to just say that we can't do it anymore? Sometimes that trial might be too tough. Sometimes that temptation is too strong. Sometimes things seem to be going all wrong. We don't always feel like we have what we need. We don't always think we know a way out of the situation that we're in. We've never faced this one before. How are we supposed to know what to do? Maybe it's easier to just give up this time. And if our God is just there to test us, to see whether or not we come through it all, knowing at any moment he's just going to do it again, what motivation is that for us to persevere? Is God really tempting us to give up? James says no. James says that God sends us good and perfect gifts. Trials and temptations, I don't think, are good and perfect gifts. A college student was taking a course in ornithology, and that's the study of birds, if you need to know. He had heard that the professor was a bit eccentric, but he had studied for several nights, and he was prepared for whatever that professor might throw at him. When he got to that classroom, however, there were no test booklets at all. Instead, one wall of the classroom was covered with nothing but pictures of various birds, and not even complete pictures of the bird, only their legs. The student's task was to identify each bird from the picture of its legs. This was something the student wasn't prepared for at all. He was furious. He rushed up to the professor and he complained, "This isn't fair. This is the dumbest test I have ever seen." The teacher looked up at him and said, "Young man, you just failed." Then the teacher picked up the student's paper. He saw that the student hadn't even put his name on it yet and said, "By the way, young man, what's your name?" And the student pulled up his pants leg and said, "You tell me." I don't believe that God is like this teacher, setting up some crazy test for us to pass or to fail. I believe that God is more like our coach. When things go wrong, when we're facing that difficult or impossible situation, when we're tempted to do what we know we shouldn't do, God is right there, coaching us on, even cheering us on. He wants us to succeed. He wants us to seek Him when it's too tough, to ask Him for advice when we don't know what to do, to set our sights on Him when we're tempted to do something else. He wants us to rely on Him when it all goes wrong. While trials or testing situations are not a good and perfect gift, what comes out of them is. That is what God sends us. He sends us teaching in our moment of need. He sends us a solution to a problem that seems unsolvable. So I don't believe that God is waiting to see where we're weak. I believe that He's waiting to see where He can make us stronger. And all He wants of us is two things: for us to ask and for us to believe. That first part in the first paragraph that we read today is important. We have to believe. We can't doubt. What use is there in asking God for help if we don't really believe that it will come or that He's even listening? God wants us to be fully believing in Him. What we lack in the trials we face, God will provide for us without finding fault. That means that He doesn't look down on us in our time of need. He doesn't say to Himself, I can't believe Adam doesn't know what to do here. We don't get any of that with God. He just provides. And we can be sure that what He does provide will not only help us, it will be good and it will be perfect. What trials are you facing this morning? What is weighing you down? Whatever it is, take heart and have joy. You'll be tempted to give up, but don't. Take heart and have joy because your struggle is not meaningless. Your perseverance will pay off. Take heart and have joy because when you're stuck, you can ask God for what you need to help you continue. No matter what you're facing, whether it's trial or temptation, God is there. You may not always be aware of it, but God is there. He's not waiting to see how you fail. He's waiting to see how He can lift you up. Amen.